just a minute. We're live. Okay. So welcome everybody. I'm gonna speak a little bit in Portuguese. Bem-vindo todo mundo. Nossa, eu tive que mudar uma chave aqui agora. Então a gente vai começar a nossa live aqui com a Paula Prober, que é uma psicóloga americana, que nós tivemos o prazer de convidar e o prazer dela aceitar esse convite, né? A live vai ser em inglês. Para quem não conseguir assistir em inglês, depois no YouTube ele gera legenda automática, mas hoje a gente vai falar em inglês. Então, quem quiser mandar pergunta no chat em português, a gente traduz e pergunta para ela, né? Então, agora eu vou começar a falar em inglês. So, Paula, I was just doing an introduction, telling people a little bit about how it's going to work, that we're going to speak English, and afterwards, if they want to ask us on the chat in Portuguese, we can translate it and ask it to you. But I wanted to start out by asking you to introduce yourself and your work and all that you've done so that people know you a little bit better, because a lot of people already know you and read your books. So please feel free to speak.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So I am a counselor based in Eugene, Oregon, and a consultant. And I've been working with the gifted population for 28, 30 years as in this work. I started off as a teacher. And my first job out of college was just a regular elementary school teacher. And then I got interested in gifted education, and I started teaching gifted children in a middle school. And I loved that. They were so, creative, and the way I taught fit with these kids, because I was a kind of a creative teacher, and I didn't do the regular curriculum. I was all over the place, and they really liked that. It was independent projects and that kind of thing. So I was in this gifted education, and then when I was about, I think I was 39, I decided to get out of education and go back to school and get a degree in counseling. And so I went back to school and started a practice. I worked in a mental health agency for a while, and then started a private practice and realized that I had been working with gifted children all those years, and that population really needed counselors who understood what their particular issues were, and that could be the focus of my practice, so that I could specialize in working with the gifted. And I worked mostly with adults at that point. And then I'm trying to think, it really actually wasn't that long ago. I think I started my blog about 7 years ago. And it was just, as a gifted person, you're always looking for the next thing, and, wanting to create something new and be challenged by the next, creative activity. And so I started blogging, which I didn't realize I would love so much. I've been doing it 7 years, and I still love it. And I like the idea of, reaching a larger community. I mean, I was working in Oregon, and that was fine, but I sort of like having a larger influence, so now I reach people around the world, and that's so gratifying to feel like I can help gifted people in Brazil. It's kind of a little mind-boggling, It's like, really, Brazil? Oh no, So I've been doing the blog, and then very soon after I started blogging, there's a small press here. It's jhflearners.org now, and they have a small press, and they asked me to write a book on gifted adults. And so then my first book, I wrote my first book for them. And then a few years later, I had requests to take my blog and make my blog into a book for people who like to have, reading, not just reading online, but reading a book, have it in their hands. And so I took my most popular blog posts and put them into my second book. So that's the second book, which has 4 years of the blog in it, and all of that just created a greater and greater reach. More and more people found out about me, and are benefiting, I guess, from the information that I share. And I guess The only other thing I'll add is that the analogy of the rainforest, it would maybe people want to know where that came from, right? So everybody probably listening or watching, there's generally discomfort with the word. In English, it's gifted. And people are really uncomfortable labeling themselves gifted. Somebody who's smarter than you are. You're not gifted, you didn't test well in school, or you didn't get good grades, or you haven't achieved a lot. There are so many reasons people deny that they're gifted. And so this was back when I was teaching, actually. I wanted to come up with a way to explain it that people would accept and people would understand, and that would be dealing with those issues of equity. People feel like, oh, I can't be gifted because that makes me better than other people, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, one day it just sort of came to me. It was great. I thought, okay, I could compare people as ecosystems. And I could say some people are like deserts, and some people are like meadows, and some are like volcanoes. And then there are some who are like the rainforest. And all ecosystems are beautiful and valuable, important. We need them all. And the rainforest ecosystem is the most complex. And it's intense, and you all in Brazil, you would know the best about the rainforest, right? And so it's just, you could tell me, right? Colorful and full of life, and contributing to the whole planet, to the well-being of the whole planet, and all of that fits the profile of these people, including the idea of we are cutting down our rainforests, and we do that to our gifted people too. We don't want them to be as big as they are. We don't want them to flourish as much as they can. People are threatened. People are uncomfortable. And so they run into, the analogy I use is they run into chainsaws in their lives, people who don't understand them. And so that's where the analogy came from. And I have gifted clients who will come to me and they will say, I'm not gifted, but I have a rainforest mind. I'll go, okay, good. That's great. So I guess that's my background.
I think that comes from a sense that I think it's still the stereotype of giftedness, right? That you have to test well, and you have to be really good in school, and you have to have career success to be gifted. And we all know this, Simone, Daphne, and you working with gifted people, that's not exactly true. In fact, what we see in adults, for example, is that some cannot even have success in their careers because they have so many interests. They cannot focus in just one thing, and they become discouraged. And then there's all these characteristics that we're talking about, the intensity, complexity, and that makes it harder for them to fit in, and they're prone to challenging the status quo and asking questions. And that just makes people maybe not receive them very well if they don't understand them. Mm-hmm. And something else that I think it's important that you were saying is how counselors, and this word, just to translate it to people who are in Brazil, would be translated as a psychologist for us. Mm-hmm. Psychologists many times don't understand the traits, and so they act like the chainsaw that you were talking about. And they're like, you're too much. Maybe you should tone it down a little bit. Maybe you're just making it bigger than it is. And people don't feel understood. I think this is something that Simone and Daphne can speak to as well. I don't know if you guys feel that in your practice. Do you guys? Okay. So I know that Daphne had a question that she wanted to ask you, if you...
In your experience, Paula, with gifted adults, do you think it's easy for them to recognize this condition when you talk about rainforest mind? And what's the hardest part of it?
What's the hardest part of them accepting themselves, accepting
yes.
I think I don't know. I think there are a lot of pieces, right, that are hard. It's you know, I was going to say the pressure, you know, it's sort of like, it's not okay to be too intense. It's not okay to be too smart. You know, school, it starts in school often. I don't know how the schools are in Brazil, but in this country, we don't serve our gifted children very well. And they are bored in school, or they're bullied in school. Now, there are exceptions for sure. There are individual teachers who love these kids and do what they can. But the school system here doesn't serve them well. So that's where it starts. You have to hide how smart you are. You're a know-it-all. That's the expression here. Oh, you think you're so smart, you're arrogant, you're a know-it-all. And so I think that's where it starts. And then there's that pressure to fit in, pressure to be like everybody else. Those are a couple of the things. And then, you know, all those other things that we work with, the many interests, you know, the multi-potentiality. How do they, you know, they think that they're supposed to find one career and one job path for their whole lives. And it's like, no, it's okay to change careers and change jobs and find something new, because boredom for the gifted person is terrible. I had somebody this week, I was talking to a client this week. She said she gets physically ill if she's bored, and bored in that sense of, you know, not just having to do the same thing, the same mundane task day after day. The boredom may not even be the right word. Maybe there's a better word in Portuguese, you know, but it's like, if I have to do, you know, if you know it already, so you need a new job because you've mastered that job. You know, most people are content. They've mastered a job. They're happy to stay in it for 30 years. A gifted person, I want the next thing. I'm depressed. You know, they're depressed if they're not being intellectually challenged. So anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, Daphne, but that's some of it.
Yes, I think you answered. It's okay, because that's exactly what we feel here. This boredom, and I think this in the professional thing, I think it's the point that's hardest to achieve multiple possibilities for this adult when they're gifted.
And with kids too, I know that the focus here is adults, but we always, Simone always says that gifted kids grow up to be gifted adults. And so we have to look at all ages. And you pointed out something, Paula, that I want to emphasize here, because when we were talking before, you know, planning our life here, you mentioned something that really struck a chord with me, Daphne and Simone, that in the US, you guys don't have that many services for these kids or adults as well, which is something that we were surprised, because here in Brazil, we have very little people talking about this. We have very little literature about it. But when we talk to you, we realize that happens there too. And that making gifted people see themselves as sick for any reason, you know. So this high level of energy can be seen as ADHD. This intensity can be seen as borderline disorder, or many other things that we talked about. And I just think that that's an interesting point to be made, that it's not just here in Brazil, it's not just in the US. I actually have patients from all around the world as well. And I'm surprised to hear when in countries that I think that they're going to have this really good infrastructure, they don't even know what to do. Since I work more with kids, they don't even know what to do with this kid in school, you know, and they just tell their parents, well, they are fast learners, so okay. But you were pointing out that they get to be depressed because of it. And I see little kids depressed because of it. So I think it's a mental health issue, and we should talk about it, you know?
It absolutely is. Yeah. And
it's me.
Yeah. I was just going to say, in schools, in our schools, we don't, well, I guess I said it already, that there are pockets of schools and teachers who love gifted kids, and there are some good programs for them. But still, 30 years ago. I'm arguing the same kids 30 years, over 30 years, it's still the same arguments because people don't think, you're so smart, so you shouldn't have any problems, right?
Exactly. And what I see with my kids is that a good teacher, maybe it's not a teacher who's specialized in giftedness, but a good teacher who has that eye, that I think it's what you had. You had the eye for the kids who were outliers. Mm-hmm. It makes all the difference. So it's not something that complicated. It's not something that we need to be creating this bureaucratic structure to do something about it. We just need to have a look at what this kid needs and what this adult needs, right?
Right.
So you wanted to say something?
Yeah. Excuse me. We forgot to introduce ourselves. We're so enthusiastic about the talk. So I'll ask Daphne and Giovanna to introduce yourselves. Then I introduce myself and make a question, and we go on. What do you think?
Sorry, we were enthusiastic about it, and you actually had something else you wanted to ask her, so I'll be quick. So for those of us who are listening and don't know us personally and are here because of Paula, me, Simone, and Daphne, we're psychologists here in Brazil, and we also work with gifted people exclusively. So that's, I work more with kids and adults, but we also have groups for kids and adolescents, but we also have groups for adults that we do as a sort of way for them to get to know themselves better and those characteristics. So I'm going to let Daphne and Simone introduce themselves.
I am a psychologist, and I am a psychotherapist and make evaluation of gifted people since 2010. And I think what I am working now is that's what Giovanna has told us now. The groups and psychotherapy and evaluation, everything.
Okay, my name is Simone. I'm a psychologist from Curitiba. I work with gifted public for a little more than 10 years. And my experience is in performing intellectual potential assessments and providing psychotherapy for gifted people for all ages, guidance for families and school, supervision for psychologists and educators, and conducting the groups about giftedness. And I'm proud to be Giovanna's and Daphne's work partner. Very glad to be here today to talk with Paula about the beauty of the rainforest mind. And I'll make a question now. Paula, in your book, you write about some questions that helps to identify the rainforest mind people. And would you talk about the ones the gifted people most recognize in their selves, and why these questions are related to this peculiarity, being gifted or being?
So you mean the quiz that I'm looking at the book right now? You mean the quiz that's in the book and those questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. So wait a minute. So I have to look at the questions and see.
The ones people talks more. Oh, I identify myself in this point, and why this is related to being gifted. What you see in your practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, because they do. I have the quiz in the book, and it's also on the blog. And so a lot of people, that's where they start. They'll look at the quiz and they'll contact me. I checked 22 out of 23 of the items on the quiz, So let me just think. I'm not sure if anyone stands out, but I'm going to look at them really quickly and just see. So the first one is, do you tell people to lighten up when you are trying to enlighten them? Or do people tell you to lighten up when you are trying to enlighten them? So there's the intensity. So that question reflects on, your enthusiasm for what you're learning, and you talk to people and you want to tell them everything about it, and they are just like, okay, I'm not interested anymore, So that's one. The being easily overwhelmed. by, the sensitivities, being easily overwhelmed by smells or certain, let's see, itchy clothes, you have to wear the right clothes or you're uncomfortable. So it's like high sensitivities, sounds, some gifted people can hear a buzzing from the lights that no one else can hear, so they're extra aware. So sensitivity is a big one that people go, oh yeah, that's me. I thought there was something wrong with me. I'm so sensitive. I thought maybe I was, on the autism spectrum, because I'm so sensitive to all of these things. So that's definitely one. Perfectionism is one that people talk about. Intuition and empathy is a big one, I guess, too, Simone. We don't think of giftedness, intellectually gifted people as highly sensitive and having a lot of empathy and sensitivities. So that's breaking that old mythology. But so they do talk a lot, I guess, with me around that they feel, other people's feelings, that they're overwhelmed by, they can walk into the room and if somebody's angry in the room, they can feel it and pick it up and be, say, what's wrong? Why do I feel angry? I shouldn't be angry when they're really feeling someone else's feelings. So, so I guess those are some of the big ones. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Lots of people, they start to agree with us when we tell you're gifted or you're a rainforest mind, they start to agree with us with this kind of quiz. Because they never recognize I'm very intelligent. No, it's not so much. So I think that these other characteristics that are not just they learn easily or they are very smart in tests. This kind of peculiarities, I think people identifies most. And I think these are the points that makes people try to understand themselves and try to manage themselves better. Because only being intelligent and have good notes, it's not a question. But I think these characteristics are the ones who makes people try to understand, and that sometimes makes people suffer when they don't understand it and they don't know how to deal with it. So thank you.
Yes, sure. Yeah, and I think they don't realize how smart they are too. There's also they're intellectually advanced, but it's normal for them. See, right? They say, right? Isn't everybody like this? I'm not that smart, I didn't win the Nobel Prize, but they really are smart. They are fast learners and they know a lot and they love learning. They're passionate about learning, but they don't necessarily see it because it's normal for them, right? They're just regular. They think they're normal when they may not be normal.
And something else that I think we should point out is that there's very little literature worldwide as to the workings of the brain of the gifted people. And I think that happens because giftedness can come in different forms. So you can have studies like on giftedness on mathematics, and that's some parts of the brain that you're going to use. But then giftedness in music, that's another part of the brain that you're going to use. And so we can see all this literature, but it's not, there isn't a consensus sometimes about executive functioning, for example. Something that I was reading the other day that I thought was really interesting that speaks to emotional intensity is that the limbic system of gifted people tends to be more reactive. So that explains a lot. But I think that we just have so much information, and then sometimes it's not a consensus because of that, because of what I was saying. Not every gifted person is the same. It's not like the autism spectrum disorder where you have symptoms and then you're going to see what's in deficit. It's not a disorder. It's not, so you don't have that. And that's something that makes it difficult for psychologists to identify giftedness as well. I think that's an important point to make. We don't have a manual on how to identify giftedness like we do for other things, right? Of course, it's not a disease. I'm not saying that it's a disease or a disorder. Of course not. But I'm saying that those things, ADHD or autism, we have the guideline of what to look for, and we don't have it with giftedness. And so that's another thing. And I think it contributes. So if professionals don't know what to look for, of course, the people in general are not going to be able to recognize in themselves some of these characteristics, right?
Right. We just use this IQ test. That's been the measure for years.
Yes. I saw in the comments that somebody was asking if there is standardized testing sometimes the English gets stuck. If there are tests to evaluate in English. And I would say that it's the same ones that we use here. It's the Wechsler scales and other things, of course, but that's the golden pattern for evaluating. But it's what we're saying that's going to give us an IQ in academic areas. And it's not going to give us all the characteristics of giftedness. That requires knowledge from the physician,
Right. We really need to educate professionals in all fields, and there's just not a lot of that happening here. So you're not behind anywhere. I was just shocked to know that you exist. It's like, no, oh my God. There are psychologists in Brazil who are specializing in giftedness. It's so exciting, Yeah, it's not there. There's a real need for education here, for sure.
Of course. And that's part of the point why we invited you, Paula, because we're realizing, I think, with the pandemic that going online is very important and reaching people across the world is very important. And we know that not everybody who's here speaks English or will understand what we're speaking because we're only speaking and there isn't a subtitle for it. But we think that it's very important because we see that you guys are struggling with the same things that we are. And maybe if we bond together and try to solve this, we're going to make more people realize that there isn't a problem with them because they're intense and complex and they question everything and they want to know something better than everybody else, or their sensitivities, like we were saying about Daphne and I were talking about this the other day, how our sensory patterns are important in our relationships. And that's something that causes, I don't know if Daphne wants to explore on that, but okay, but we were just talking about how sometimes people who are more sensitive, which I see as the pattern for giftedness, so you have hypersensitivity instead of hyposensitivity, and then you get home and your husband or your wife is really extroverted and needs a lot of stimuli to feel like he has a good day, or so he wants to go to a bar or he wants to call a lot of friends, and then you just want to be quiet because you were stimulated all day and you need to quiet down so you don't feel overwhelmed, right? And so that is something that we've talked a lot about with occupational therapists here because they help us with that, right? So we send our clients to that so they can do sensory integration. I don't know if you've heard that or if that's the right term in English, but it is. So that they can be desensibilized and not so overwhelmed by everything all the time. Because I think that something else that we need to talk about gifted people is that they're receiving a huge amount of information from all sides. They're receiving a huge amount of information through their cognitive via and through emotions. Like you said, they walk into a room and they can feel what everybody else is feeling and they can tell what everybody else is thinking because they can have that intuition very attuned. And then there are the sensory patterns that many times are hypersensitive. And then you get to the end of the day, of course you're overwhelmed. That makes total sense. But then maybe other people around you don't understand that. And maybe your psychologist doesn't understand that. So that's the point that we're trying to make here in Brazil, is that everybody needs to understand about giftedness. It's not just us that work with it, but everybody who's working with that person.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yes, I think it's very hard for them to be on their shoes and on their skin. They talk to me, and when gifted people come to us, they are usually not happy, because if they were happy, they don't really need us. And when they come to us, they are looking for help, and we usually meet people who feel hurt, depressed, and very anxious about their lives, and they often feel like imposters or underachievers. And what do you think that contributes for this, Paula? What do you see in your experience about this underachievement?
Yeah, that is a huge topic. And you know, it's interesting, right? Those are the ones that we see, right? I don't see so many, you know, like the high achieving gifted people don't necessarily come to therapy, right? Although I should say that, you know, they also do, you know, because they're still lonely, right? They may be, you know, having found something to do that fulfills them work wise, but they're still, you know, there's nobody they can talk to, right? So they do still need us too. But you know, I think, you know, tell me what you think about this. One source of the underachieving can be the early pressure to, you know, when the little children, you know, it's easy to see young children that they're very smart, you know, because they're advanced. They're reading when they're 3 years old, let's say, right? They're verbal early. They're talking in complete sentences and asking complicated questions at an early age. So it's easy to see them, but sometimes the parents, without realizing it, and maybe their teachers too, will emphasize how smart they are and how high achieving they are when they're 3 and 4 and 5 years old, right? So that can create perfectionism and underachieving, because their identity becomes connected to their achievement. So if they're not achieving, they're worthless. I mean, it can be that bad. You know, they feel like they're not good enough, or they just feel just really have low self-esteem, because their achievement is why they're loved. That's what they feel from that early overreaction to their abilities. So that's one reason for the underachievement later.
I see, Paula. I'm a Jungian psychologist too, and I see that when something is too much, too exaggerated in the conscience, the unconscious it tries to equilibrate. And sometimes when you're consciously, you think you are too much, you are the best, something in your unconscious will tell you you're not good, and you fail. And sometimes it's the drama of some gifted people. They talk about the shame they feel when people see to them with awe. Oh, I admire you, but I'm afraid of you too. They are always not comfortable with this kind of reaction that people have about them. And so I see it happening every day. Generally, gifted people don't like to be too evident. They try to equilibrate this, and sometimes in a not very good way. So that's why we are here, to help them with these things.
Right. Well, sometimes they choose. I have clients who smoke pot, you know, smoke marijuana. That's because that's the only thing that slows their mind down. You know, that's sort of like they dumb themselves down with marijuana and alcohol. That's one of the bad coping strategies, right? Because it you know, it quiets down their excitabilities.
Could you tell the people that are watching us what a good coping strategy would be in that case?
Well, sure. I think it's all those things that, it's popular right now, at least in this country, the self-care, the relaxation tools, the mindfulness, meditation. So those things are really good. And each person needs to custom design their plan, right? So some of them I had somebody exercise. Exercise calms her down, going out for a run, making sure she makes time to do that. Other people, it's not exercise. It's a meditation practice. Some people it's journal writing. Some people it's art, having just an opportunity to do some drawing. Some people it's dancing and music. So it's really find those things and think about it like it's an essential practice to take care of yourself. It's not a selfish, waste of time. It's like, this is your body, mind needs you to find the time, make the time to, for self-care, to calm your nervous system, to relax, to soothe yourself. And you think you're gifted, so you shouldn't need that, but that's not true. It's like, no, you need it. And so those are some of the things.
I think there's another aspect to it, two aspects actually. One is how they become intertwined with the tasks that they're doing, and so they forget to eat and sleep and do all the things that make them human. And the other thing is, I think this guilt is something that I hear very often from my clients. This guilt that I can do this, and it's going to have a good impact on people's lives. And so I should keep doing it, and I cannot stop. I have to keep doing it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like often they forget they're human and they need to be reminded of that, mm-hmm. that they need to stop and slow down.
Well, you know what that makes me think of? The idea that gifted people are so capable. There's so much that they can do. So I tell my clients, it is impossible. You cannot say yes to everything you could do just because you can do it faster. It's easier for you than everybody else. That doesn't mean you should say yes to it, because you will be exhausted. You will burn yourself out. It won't serve you, your children, for you to overwork. So I will explain to them that they need to discriminate and evaluate, where should I say yes, where should I say no, and they have to say no some of the time, because it just just because they can do it doesn't mean they should.
Yes,
Paula, I'm just remembering a few weeks ago we're talking about that. How we can apply the concept of environmental conservation to the way we take care of the rainforest mines.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, just think of it that way. Is that what you're saying, Simone? That, yeah, like you would take care of the forest. Like we need to be environmentalists, right? And take care of our planet. You need to take care of yourself. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm.
I feel like that is something that makes a lot of people. Somebody commented to learn how to say no. Yes, that is very important. And I feel like I see in my patients that they're not just intense with their work, they're intense with their hobbies as well. And I was reading something that really caught my eye about Nobel Prize winners, that most of them had hobbies that they excelled on. Like if they're going to write, they're going to write a book that's going to get awards. And if they're going to climb something, they're going to climb the Everest. And that's, they were doing a research on the difference between regular scientists and scientists that won Nobel Prizes. And they saw this. And I was like, well, that makes a lot of sense, because I see this with my clients, that when they pick up a hobby, they're not just learning how to speak a different language. They're trying to be excellent at it, you know, like they lived in this country for a decade. And if they're going to write a book, they're going to research everything about how to write a book, and they're going to download apps to know that make it more efficient, and they're going to give it to editors to see what it looks like and to see if it's good. And I'm just giving a few examples from people that I've talked to, but I see that it's something that this high intensity, it works at all levels. And another level that it works at that we should think about is relationships. I don't know if you see that in romantic relationships as well. This intensity, sometimes it makes people a little bit frightened.
For sure. Yeah. It's I don't know. I'm not sure what to say about it, but it's with friends, not just, partners, but also in friendships. It's really hard to find friends where that level of intensity is compatible, because you're not like, as long as you find a gifted person, you'll be fine. It's like, no, there are complexities to everyone. And too much intensity together doesn't necessarily work well either. So it's, the relationship issues are tricky. But with clients that I see, they do need to find someone who has some compatibility in their capacity, in their intellectual and emotional capacity. Otherwise, it's really challenging. That said, I know people who are with partners who aren't gifted. People who are gifted and their partners are not, and some of those relationships are fine. So there isn't one answer to that. I think it's complicated. What do you see, Giovanna, in your people?
I think something that Daphne always says is that they search for different groups of people so they can feel fulfilled in different settings, but not necessarily that one person is going to fulfill all of that. So maybe this romantic partner that isn't gifted, he's fulfilling something. That maybe it's not even this intellectual capacity. Maybe you get that from your work or from your hobbies or whatever, and you get something else that is very, very valuable as well from your romantic partner. So I don't know if Daphne agrees, because that's what she always says, and I see that it's true. But actually, what I see here, somebody even asked on our comments if parents usually recognize themselves through their kids' process. And I see that happens very often. And most of my parents are gifted, both are gifted. And send them to be evaluated, and and they do the groups and all this stuff, and they start to realize that maybe this little apple didn't fall that far from the tree. That it came from somewhere. So
I see that gifted people, they need supportive people around, in family or romantic partners, because the world is so hostile sometimes that they need supportive people. And sometimes this person is gifted, and they understand the gifted people, and they can help and respect with easily. But sometimes the person knows how to respect and to be supportive, even if they are not gifted. But I think that to have in the intimity, to have a space to be totally yourself, and to be understood and not criticized, and to have a space to stay relaxed, stay okay with who you are, because in lots of other situations, the gifted people, they learn how to control themselves, how not to frighten people, and these things. So if the person is supportive, respectful, it's okay.
I think they only need to co-regulate, like feel safe, and that's all. Some places when we can find people who say, oh, okay, feel free to be yourself. And then I think that's okay.
Well, what you're saying, Daphne, too, that's what I tell my clients, that you go to the movies with one person, and you do your sports activities with this person, and you go to, you read books with this person, right? And you can't find it all in one. And that's sad. I mean, I have to validate their feelings that, but I want one person. I want one, it's like, yeah, it's hard, but that's, yeah, I suggest that they do that too. Just make a circle of people who have their advanced abilities maybe in that one area, and then you can join them in that. And then, the person who loves, I don't know, studying something really unusual, you study with that person, that unusual thing. And so, yeah, that's often what I will tell people too. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's another thing that the internet has helped us, right, Paula? Because I think that 30 years ago, for you to find somebody who understands a lot about it, this is specific subject that you like as well, that's very rare. If you live in a small town, that's really hard. But with the internet, we can find those people very easily, right? Something else that I was thinking about here is that you know the concept of a highly sensitive person from Elaine Aron. I feel like we are talking about empathy and sensitivity, but we need to be reminded that we will find that not only in gifted population, right, but also throughout normal people. That's what we would call them. And so maybe when we find somebody who's highly sensitive or very empathetic as well, then you can find a match there. I don't know if you see that as well. Paula, I would like to ask you, what advice would you give to gifted people who are watching us tonight?
Well, other than all the things we've already said, right? I think it's give yourself permission to go deep, into understanding yourself. That you're typically gifted people are very introspective as well, and they're asking the questions of meaning and purpose and why am I here, and so, but they feel like maybe it's selfish to do that they need to take care of everybody else and answer everybody else's questions first. And so maybe one piece of advice is give yourself time to explore who you are, and let what makes your heart sing. What do you love? And because I feel like finding the paths, and it's not just one, right? There are several paths, right? That to self-understanding, to self-actualization, to making a difference on the planet, to give yourself time and permission to explore who you are, that it's not selfish, that there's nothing wrong with doing that introspective work. And then if you're a parent, that will serve your children as well. It's great modeling for your children, even though you're not going to have as much time to do it because you're a parent, but it'll be good for your children to explore and understand yourself. And then, we're all therapists, right? So if there's trauma in your childhood, the adult is in therapy because of not just because of the giftedness, but because of trauma in childhood, then make the time to heal from that. Stop, the legacy of trauma that has been handed down to you from your parents and their parents, right? That's a powerful thing you can do for yourself, for your family, for your ancestors, for the planet, is to heal the trauma from the past. So see your therapist, find your therapist and do that work, as well as understanding yourself as a gifted person.
Paula, some people are asking in the chat if I know the answer, but I would like to see you talking about this. If it's common, if it happens a lot, parents start thinking about being gifted when they discover their kids are gifted.
Mm-hmm. That happens. Yeah, I think that's what happens most of the time. You know, I think I hear that all the time, that the parents, even if they were identified as gifted children in the schools, it sort of goes away. They don't think about it till they start seeing their child not doing well in school, or, you know, being real emotional, and, you know, they start exploring it for their kids. That's typical in this country. It's very common. You know, the fact that I'd never had children, right? And I got into this field, I'm sort of unusual, because I got into the field through teaching and education, not because I found I had a child, you know, who was gifted. I'd be curious, you know, I don't know if this is the right place for the three of you to talk about how you got into this field, but I would love to know how each of you found the gifted field. Is this the place to talk about that?
Yeah. My first year at psychology university, some people, a teacher here from Curitiba, it was palestra, como é que traduz, Giovana? She were going to make a talk to the students about giftedness.
Yes,
I've never heard about that, so I thought, it's different, let's go. And when she was talking about that, I started to identify myself with the difficulties. So I got very interested in this topic. I made my evaluation, and yes, I'm gifted. And then I started to study everything I could find about that. And it was in 2006. So here I am. I was 33-year-old when I heard about giftedness for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And were you already a therapist?
Excuse me?
Were you a therapist at the time?
I was at the first year of psychology graduation, studying about psychology. And so I got very interested about this.
And then you just focused on working with these clients as in
for me and for everybody.
Great.
Because Simone worked with marketing before she was a psychologist. So she has two careers. With marketing.
Marketing. Oh, okay.
I was an art director in advertising agencies.
Huh.
And then I got crazy working with that, and so I decided to study psychology.
Well, you asked if it was the place to talk about this, Paula. I guess we're talking about it.
Good. What about you?
Sorry? That's my turn. Okay. I first heard about giftedness during the graduation psychology, and in my last year, I started to work with gifted children, and I always thought about them like them, not me. And when I started to work with Simone in this institute here in Curitiba, we started to do this group for study giftedness, and they always talk about this characteristics, and I usually said, okay, you gifted. And one time Simone told me, no, but you have this profile too. I think there is something about you too. And I am, no, not me. And then I made this evaluation, and okay, now I have to talk about it. And it's been about 8 years now that I know about it.
Okay. Okay. Giovanna, what about you?
Yeah, and I guess we talk about it because it's important. We always tell our clients, like, of course, you're not going to go out on the street and say, oh, well, hey, I'm gifted. But I also don't think it's something that we should keep in the drawer and not talk about it, right? And so with me, it was pretty much the same as Simone and Daphne. I was working at this institute, and they would evaluate us when we got in so that we knew how the process worked. That was just the sole point of it. And so I found out about my giftedness, and it didn't come as a surprise in the sense that I was always very academic, so I always was good at school. But now I understand, like, I think the emotional part was the most important, understanding the intensity, and especially related to work, as Daphne and Simone, who work with me, know. That was an important part of it. And now just realizing how many people around me are gifted as well, my friends and my family. And I think that I never felt what many of my clients feel, like they're a fish out of the water. I don't know if that's a saying in English as well, but that's how we say it here. I never felt like that because now I realized that I was surrounded by highly gifted people. So I always had friends who were very smart and made sense to me, right? I wanted to ask you, Paula, so we can wrap this up and on a good note, what you think personally is the point of is not maybe the point, but why gifted people exist in the world? What you think it's the mission they have? It's a little bit more personal, but we have our opinion, so I wanted to hear yours.
About why gifted people exist? Is that, yeah? That's, wow. That sort of brings up a whole spiritual thing, right? That's kind of, so sometimes, I think I wrote this at the back of my book, sometimes I think that gifted people may be old souls. Maybe we've lived a lot of lifetimes or something, if you believe in reincarnation, right? And so that we're here to make a difference, that we're here to have an impact, to do something, to change things on the planet, I guess, and that and again, it's like, it's not a better than thing. It's just like, there are young souls who have these things to learn, and there are old souls who are kind of like, okay, I've done all those things, and now I'm at another level of development, and I'm here to what would make the world a better place, or have an impact in a positive way, to maybe raise, okay, here it is. Raise the consciousness of humankind. Get us functioning at a higher level, to become more conscious and sensitive and loving here on planet Earth. Does that fit with what you say?
That's perfect. That is perfect. Actually, Daphne has a letter that she wrote to gifted people. I have to translate it to send it to you later, because it's really beautiful. And I told her that I finished this professional course that I was doing, reading this letter, because it talks about what you're saying, how it's hard being gifted, but how we're here on a greater mission. And I really believe that. I really do. So I just wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, Paula, for accepting this invitation.
It's really an honor and a privilege to be with you. It's just, yeah, I'm just happy to be here. So, and to have met all of you, and to be able to, I hope we can stay in touch.
Yes, of course. I'm sure we're going to do a lot of things together in the future still. Me, Daphne, and Simone, we thank you very much, and we appreciate you being so accessible and just being so prompt when you responded to us. And I think that speaks to this vision that you see for giftedness of making a world a better place, you know, and sharing this knowledge and talking about it. I think that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about IQs here, right? Mm-hmm. And so thank you. I'm going to let Daphne and Simone wrap it up, but I just wanted to say this very specially. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you so much. Should I just leave?
Thank you so much. I don't know how to express this in English, but thank you very, very, very much.
Yes, it's an honor. It's an honor for me to be here, Paula. Thank you. Because I think when you write, when I first read your books, I just thought, wow, she can see through our minds. And that's amazing. Thank you very much for being here in this planet.
I'd like to say to everybody who are watching us that both of us, we are at Instagram, so you can look for us by our names and find Paula and find Paula's book and Giovanna, Daphne, because there were lots of questions that we couldn't talk about them. So you can write directly to us and we can talk for a little bit more about all of that.
Oh yes, follow Paula on Instagram because we love her Instagram. And read her books. If you haven't read them, we highly suggest that. But a lot of people who are here already read them. So, and we just wanted to say something else is we're doing a group for gifted adults. So I'm speaking directly to Brazilian people. I'm going to switch to Portuguese, I think, Paula, if you excuse me. A gente vai fazer o grupo de adultos agora, que vai começar no dia 29 de julho, eu, a Simone e a Daphne. Então, para todos os brasileiros aí que quiserem participar, né, porque o grupo vai ser em português, a gente vai falar sobre vários temas relacionados à superdotação. Então, tá todo mundo convidado, quem quiser participar, é só ver lá no link da bio da Cognos no Instagram. Tá bom, gente? Oh. So, thank you very much, Paula, once again. And good night to everybody.
Thank you for coming, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.